My name is Kentaro Toyama. I am a researcher at UC Berkeley, and this talk is about myths of mobiles for development. And what I want to talk about is to kind of unlearn some of the things that people think that they know about technology in development, and to particularly address some very pervasive assumptions that people make about the value of technology for development. The core of my argument is that technology is an amplifier of human intention and capacity, and only an amplifier, which means that it's not always necessarily positive, nor is it necessarily negative, but the impact that it has is ultimately dependent on the people and the institutions that use it. And in development, that often means that you have to work on increasing human capacity, increasing institutional capacity before the technology can have a positive impact. I'm going to, ask everybody to hold their hands up. Okay, everybody, thank you. Okay, now, put your hands down as soon as you disagree with the statement, or with the statement that I made, okay? So the first one is, members of a national army should have guns. Okay, everybody agree with that? Some people disagree. Members of an army should own guns. Okay, everyone's comfortable with that. Some people lower their hand. Okay, a lot of pacifists. That's great. Okay. Next question. Members of the police force should have guns. Okay, some people agree, some people not. Okay.
What if you disagree with the first one and you agree with the second one?
That's okay. You're allowed to put your hand back up. Okay. Number 3. Ordinary civilians should have guns. Okay, most hands have gone down. Some people still think it's okay. Good. That's okay. Okay, next question. 5-year-old children should have guns. Oh, you still think that's okay? Okay. So for you specifically, I have the last question. Okay, convicted serial murderers should have guns. No, okay, good. Okay, strangely in America, I see some hands still up. Okay. Now, the reason why I asked this is that the technology is again the same, it's a gun, right? But depending on the context, you perceive it to be either a positive thing or a negative thing. That's also because the intention of the person using the technology changes what the technology does, right? And I'll claim this is also true for all ICTs and also true for mobile phones. So, it's very easy to highlight the positive benefits of mobile phones, and we do that all the time. But there are also lots of negatives, and they're increasingly being understood by people who study mobile phones, and even probably by ourselves, right? I'll make the analogy to television. So, people used to think of television as a unqualified positive thing, because here's this thing that can deliver images and audio to your living room, right? It can do all sorts of great things. Could be used for education. But today people don't typically think of television as a net positive thing. They think it's good for entertainment, but in some cases it's probably not even good as a form of entertainment, right? So something has changed about our conception of television. And my claim is that mobile phones have a similar issue, which is that there are increasingly studies that show that very poor people who have mobile phones will spend money that they used to spend on food and education for their children on talk time, right? Now, it's not clear what they're doing with that talk time. Maybe they're increasing their income, but usually it's for social reasons, right? Maybe that social reason has value, but they're taking it away from something else that we know has value, right? So there's situations like this. There's also situations where there's lots of problems that happen because there are mobile phones. So for example, when I was in India, there was a big issue. There was a big news event where this woman had compromising photos of her taken and then spread out over MMS. Obviously that wouldn't have happened if there was no mobile phone technology. So there's negative impacts that it's just as important to pay attention to as much as positive impacts. And again, it shows that technology amplifies underlying human intent rather than being a net positive thing. Who can name different technologies that have previously been proposed as a way to, let's say, contribute to education in developing communities? So television is certainly one. What else?
One laptop per child.
One laptop per child. Anything else? Books?
Satellite radio.
Satellite radio? Anything else?
Digital kiosks.
Digital kiosks, you mean with computers? Yeah, okay. What else? Teleconferencing. Okay, who can think of the example that goes back as far back as possible in terms of history?
The tablet.
The tablet, okay, right, pen and tablet. Blackboard, good. What else? As soon as you get into ICTs, for some reason, these claims have not held out, right? So again with television, in the 1960s, people literally thought that television was going to make such an impact on education that we would no longer have to have schools. Okay, so exactly the people like you, right, but in your parents' generation, possibly your grandparents' generation, they thought, you know, we can change development in Kenya if we just get every household in the country a television. Why? Because then we could pipe in lectures on TV, or we could show educational programs on TV, right? You're smiling. Why are you smiling?
Because it sounds real. I mean, if I was to transplant myself to that situation,
You can imagine, right?
It's plausible.
It seems very plausible, right? Today, nobody believes that anymore, right? Why? Because if you have a TV, you're not going to be watching the educational program that's teaching you mathematics. You're going to watch, I don't know, you know, what's the equivalent of American Idol in Kenya? Tusker, right? So, right? I mean, that's what people end up watching, and it's not because the television can't be used for education. It's that the underlying desire that people have once they have this technology is to use it for entertainment, and it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're a farmer, you've been working for 12 hours out in the field. The last thing you want to do is spend more energy learning mathematics because it's going to help your future employment prospects, right? And I'll argue that the same thing will be true for mobile phones, especially if you're trying to do difficult things like deliver education. Here's the next question. Okay, so everybody's familiar with Google, I assume. Of the following 3 Google products, which one has made a net profit for the company? Okay? Search, YouTube, Google Maps. Search, okay? Search, everyone knows. Okay, now who here uses YouTube on a regular basis? Or, you know, watches videos on YouTube? Not everybody, but a lot of people, okay? How much is Google Maps used? Do you use Maps at all? Okay? Good, okay? So, great, every day. Okay, so here is a company that is often considered the smartest company in the world, okay? And it has products like Google Maps and YouTube, which many of us think have become more or less indispensable to our lives, right? So the need in the market appears to be very strong, the demand appears to be strong, and yet the smartest company in the world is not able to turn it into a viable business. Okay, they're trying, and actually YouTube has turned the corner now where they're able to, they're in the black as far as their operational costs go. But they paid $1.6 billion at the beginning for it. They have not recouped that cost. Yeah, question?
Do they actually make money from search or just from advertising?
Well, when I say search, it is advertising from search. I mean, if you ask them, they'll say it's all advertising. So that's true. But it's the advertising that is associated with search that makes them the vast majority of their income.
I was just going to add to that, I don't disagree with you at all. I think they're just like an and. You know, I'm a social entrepreneur. What we're trying to do is actually create such large-scale manufacturing here that sanitary pads are reduced by about 40%, and we can make so much money that we can create an endowment so that the non-profit-y type work can be funded. Right? So I think that we have a great opportunity, and I actually think history is bringing us to that place where the nonprofit world essentially started because companies were very exploitive, right? And so there's this reaction of unions and nonprofits to help people. And I think that we are at a place, and technology is facilitating that in some ways, not amplifying, different type of thing, but to allow business and social agendas to come together to be more supportive of delivery of services. So I think that we can think about starting businesses, but we can also think about how do we use the profits of those businesses to expand the self-worth and capacity and education of people so that they can then be more free to grow and develop.
Let me identify a couple of stakeholders here. One, we've got the business end, right? Who identify, they look at market intelligence reports that basically say mobile penetration is so high, so that's why we got to sell our stuff. There's the NGOs and the non-profits that believe since everyone has a mobile phone, we can use that to make everyone's lives better. There's the guy who is being targeted, the owner of the mobile phone, me, who gets all these SMSs and all these NGOs talking to me saying, hey, do this, send an SMS to this short code, do this, do that, right? I also have my concerns. First of all, the tech could be too complicated. It could be too expensive. There's all that stuff. There's the donors. I don't know if there's any donor here. I'm not too sure there is. There's the donors who, my picture of donors is really skewed, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's this bunch of rich guys that they're already rich. All they want to see is their money is an impact, right? So they don't really care what happens as long as I can say that my money made this person's life better, right? So there are all these different stakeholders. What I want to bring out is the mobile phone, right? As a donor, I would want to use a mobile phone because basically that's a new hot thing, right? What are each of their stakes? I've heard from the business, from the non-profit. What about the base of the pyramid? Amo,
I was going to represent the operator, which you didn't.
Okay, yeah, the operator. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm from the GSM Association, the Development Fund, and touching on stakeholders, touching on financial sustainability, a practical piece of, I guess, quasi-opinion, quasi-fact is if you want to reach high scale, one of the best ways to work with the operator. If you want to work with the operator, you need to present them with some kind of rational business case. If it's a profit motive or some kind of non-commercial benefits. So what we kind of advocate is that most of these M4D projects, you want to work with the network operator, you need to have either profit motive or commercial benefits. You can work with the CSR branch or the philanthropic branch, but if you want to truly unlock the scale and the enthusiasm and the support of a network operator and reach M-Pesa style scale, then you need some kind of business rationale or revenue model.
Is that I'm one of those guys who agree that technology is one of the amplification factors for social and economic development, but there's also the other element that is just mentioned of entrepreneurship and corporate sector participation in that effort. Compare the mobile money industry in the region and M-Pesa and M-Health in the region. Look at those at this point in time. Mobile money is much more developed than M-Health or M-Agri or any other M-something, and that's not because the M-Agri and M-Agriculture and M-Health are not very important and very critical for our populations, but mobile money is much less critical. But when the corporate sector picks up something, or let me just call it entrepreneurs, when they pick up something and they drive it as a value proposition to the population, then that's a very important amplification factor. So my proposition, and I don't know what Kentaro's reaction will be on this, is that technology is just one of those several amplification factors, and one additional amplification factor is entrepreneurship and the involvement of the private sector.
Role play. I live in Kibera, and every day I have this bunch of NGOs, businesses, all that stuff that come to my area and tell me, hey, I've got this short code, use it for M-Agriculture, M-Money, mobile money, whatever, right? The whole lot. So a while back I actually saw a tweet. Apparently there's like 11 NGOs for every person in Kibera. Assuming all those 11 NGOs, yeah, I'm serious. Assume all those NGOs, actually Mushere, I'd appreciate your comment on this. Assume all those NGOs have a short code, right? They say, SMS your name and your ID number or whatever it is to this number, say 1234, right? And when you interact with the system, the idea is will make your life better, right? So I have to cram 11 shortcodes to interact with every day. Each one costs anything between 1 shilling and 5 shillings. So say roughly in a day, I'd be using, let's put 50 shillings, right? Which in Kibera is a meal, a good enough meal, right? Why should I, as a base of the pyramid, be subjected to that? Let me show you.
All those NGOs have money to spend, and their program officers don't need the salary. Wow, 11. Those NGOs are a whole market by themselves.
Yeah.
My interest, of course, in a whole lot of this is from a user-centered design perspective. And one of the things that I always, okay, not always see, but let's say frequently see,
is that complete disconnect between the user and the technology. So over the past few years, I've become more inclined to use the term D4M and D4IT, and because it makes more sense to start with development first and find the development goal. We need better sanitation. We need better healthcare. We need better agriculture. We need better financial services, and then find the best route to get the best outcome possible. That allows, so I agree with what Kentara was saying, and that allows us to craft more meaningful solutions. Whether the solution will be, printed posters that get plastered all over street lamps, or whether it's SMS or whatever it is. Now, what you eventually see when you go into what you call the BOP, I think is two different things. One, you have the commercial side. That's Red CK Prahalad's fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, and wants to make money there. And you have the NGOs who are looking to make an impact. And I think both of them can have some impact, can have some good, if they go back first and start with what does the person want done. The guy in Kibera has a lot of issues on his mind. He has food to put on his plate. He has kids to educate. Your service has got to have a compelling case for him to even be interested. So there's a very good chance out of all those 11, 0 get used in a month, probably in any given year, because they're just non-profit noise. Because they don't fit within the user's ecosystem of things that they need done, in any day.
If I could add to that, if you're looking at 11 NGOs, if you're looking at 11 NGOs, you also have 11 brands of soap, 11 brands of butter, 11 brands of. It's up to you to make that choice. As a consumer, when I have my mobile phone, the mobile phone is just a tool that says, okay, now there are 11 NGOs, but at the same time I can get 11 adverts for everything. So in terms of what can help me, I make the choice. If I decide to use Omo today and it cleans 90% more than TOS, I'm going to use Omo. That's the choice I make. And as an NGO, if my shortcode is going to improve my life, I make that choice to experiment with that product. So you're not necessarily saying with the NGO putting out their shortcode out there, just speaking from an economic term, you're saying you have choices of blue bands, you have choices of NGOs, they all promise one premise or the other that you say it's going to improve my life, but now it's up to you to take that in.
Because at the end of the day, they're going to choose which NGO they're going to go with. And at some point, the donors are going to look at the NGOs and say, this NGO is underperforming, this NGO is overperforming, so I'm going to pour my money and put them there. So the more that we are offering solutions to people at the bottom of the pyramid or to consumers, that's a great thing for the consumer at the end of the day.
Okay. I was part of a research team that went out to Machakos, Makueni, southeastern Kenya, very hot, very dry. And there are people, who are struggling with hunger out there. And almost like in the middle of this circuit, is a small village called Bumbuni. It was a very rough ride getting to Bumbuni, but when we get there, we find this Kenya ICT board Pasha Center with fantastic LCD screens and fast computers and a warning at the door that there's highly advanced closed-circuit TV monitoring this facility and storing all the images in a folder in the cloud. But among 7 or so Pasha centers and digital villages that we visited and interviewed the operators, not a single one of them had ever heard of M-Health or M-Agriculture or M-Education. And when we asked them what was the primary destination for users sitting at their keyboards, it was Facebook, it was Yahoo, it was Gmail and YouTube. And this was out in Bumbuni, where part of the whole idea of putting a digital village or a Pasha center was to put M-Agriculture, connect the farmer with this fantastic new information that will allow better agriculture and eradicate hunger. But the farmers, the guys I met outside the Pasha Center, sitting there waiting for, I can't remember what, don't even know what that building is for. They know it as the M-Pesa place. So that for me is a picture that is replicated in Kibera. You get down there and amongst all those tin roofs, there's one thing that you see see in the better part of town as well. You see TV antennas. Tons of them. You'd think that these guys should not have bought a telly because they need to put money in food and education for their children because they're hard up. They live in Kibera. But no, they went out and borrowed money and scrounged and did whatever they needed to do to get a telly. That was the pain that they had. They had a pain for entertainment, and they sorted it out. So I think in a place like Bomboni, it would be better to start by finding out what the pain is, what do these people need, and then craft the right solution. So again, starting with the development, so that by the time you're actually having a problem with a variety of NGOs and a variety of brands, they make enough compelling sense for the person on the ground to take notice. Otherwise, it just remains noise.
So, note of human nature. You see, the people in Bomboni or wherever, their needs are centered around their agriculture or whatever. So that you can start from D and it will work there. But the dynamism of an area like Kibera means that the 11 NGOs will work because they will target different needs for different people. But because I will not know what your need is, I will not come and ask you first. I will come with the solution first. Then it will be up to you to either take it or leave it. See, the availability of all those NGOs does not mean that you're being forced to take it. Yeah. You just come and I tell you, hey, I have this, so it is up to you really to take it. Understand? So that in the life cycle of developing an app, of developing a solution, you can either do just a blanket market research and say this one is targeted for a specific group of people. Then you will develop it for that specific person. Right? So that person, it will be up to them to either choose to take it or not to take it.
Oh no, I'm just asking, does that then mean that the need for going out and asking the basic questions or observing the people in the natural environment so that you can have better chances of success?
Sorry, let me add to M for D, as opposed to seeing that the mobile phone is what's there, we can use that. You'd rather, he's proposing you go to the people and see what it is they already have, and then bring that up to now the technology. So what's your comment on that approach? D for M, as he called it.
Yeah, I would actually say D with M, right?
D with M.
Yeah. I mean, I agree as an approach. So if you are, this is my third recommendation, right? If your goal really is development impact, then you want to start with a problem, work back to the optimal solution. I agree that, there's nothing wrong with having multiple solutions in the space, right? And, certainly there's not one best solution. There are multiple different options, and there is a value in having people choose. The one thing that I want to comment on, in this line of discussion is that there's a very strong underlying assumption that consumption is what leads to good things. Right? Certainly, when you buy something, you get some value out of it, and that's a positive thing, right? But the real problem is not having that thing, right? So, for example, who here thinks they got richer when they bought their fancy new mobile phone?
I know for a fact I did.
That you got richer?
Yes.
Yeah, and how was that?
I use it to generate money.
And how do you do it?
I make phone calls and I send emails just like the rural villagers do when they get a phone call, if they're intelligent enough and have the fore advice.
Yes, and do you think who do you think makes more money with their phone, you or the poor rural villager?
As a percentage of income and increase, the villagers, in my experience.
As an absolute amount, because that's what ultimately...
As an absolute amount, I make more because I have a master's degree. They make less because they have no education.
That's what makes the difference. Now, because you have a master's degree, you can get a job that allows you to afford the mobile phone or any tool that will allow you to do your job better, right? That's what makes that's the fundamental difference between you and the poor villager, not the fact of the phone, right? So that's the critical thing in development, isn't?
What's your background?
I'm a computer scientist by training.
Yes.
I spent 5 years in India trying to do technology for development programs.
Cool.
Okay, yeah.
How many years in Africa?
Actually, no. Well, only a few months in Ghana teaching calculus.
Okay. Anybody else have development experience in rural Africa? Yes. You? I know you. Yeah. Very good. So now, in a different kind of perspective, because when we're talking about ICT for D here, there's a huge amount of capacity building that's not being done.
Yes, exactly.
There's a huge amount of talk and not a lot of walk.
I completely agree.
And there's investment in all the wrong areas. So the investment thinking is not thinking from the village level, but thinking from the master's degree level. So there's a disconnect there.
When you say that, you're saying that it tends to be top down and not looking at the problems. Well, I think we've been having that conversation, and I completely agree with that.
So my question is that while it's wonderful for us to have these meetings continually, which I've been for 6 years now, coming to these kinds of meetings on ICT for D, what I would like to see is there any sort of a consensus for a game plan and structure to actually implement the suggestions that are happening here in a real and tangible way with monitoring and evaluation for results, since we do have the technology and knowledge between us to do that?
I mean, I would say if you're asking for general consensus among people who are interested in development on how to do all of the things that you mentioned, monitoring, evaluation,
How
etc.
to do ICT for D, and while we're doing that, do proper monitoring and evaluation. 70% of the World Bank investment in ICT for D has been a failure. So we're still at that stage. We're not to the stage of implementation yet.
This discussion is about that. I agree.
Yeah.
Trying to put out our businesses, and he came up with and said, plain and simple, if you're going to develop for economic reasons, try and focus more on that. If you're going to develop for development, you would focus on that. That's basically what we came with.
Reasons, and the guys who are doing it for development reasons, to create an impact, do any of them get to a point where they clash, either in terms of I don't know, methodology or I don't know, do they clash at any point? Because I'm hearing one side argue from one perspective.
You mean the desire to grow a business and the desire to do development?
Yes.
Do they clash?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I'll talk about that extensively tomorrow at the IHOP. But basically I'll say that, there's two issues. One is anytime you're chasing two goals simultaneously as opposed to one goal, it's harder to achieve both goals in one shot, right? That's just fundamental fact of life. There's also an ethical question, which is that if you're running a business in which you are in fact making a profit from sales to the poor, then you are necessarily asking, there is a zero-sum question at some point, which is, where does this extra shilling go? Does it stay with somebody who is spending more than 50% of their income on food, or does it go to the entrepreneur who's living a decent life in Nairobi already, right? And as long as you have a goal to make a profit, that's going to always go in the direction of, I want to get as much money out of my customer as possible, right? Whereas if your goal is ultimately development, it will be, if I do end up extracting money from the customer, am I convinced that I'm pouring back at least as much value to that person, right? And there will be a tendency to try to keep as much of, try not to shave off as much profit as you can. So that balance is very difficult. I mean, it's an ethical question.
I'm lazy and donor driven. And so you get money to do some sort of HIV education thing, and you write a nice proposal and get money to develop something, rather than actually starting with what the person needs. And I think in that way, for-profits are actually a bit more authentic in their integrity towards their goal.
They're authentic because their goal is money,
Yes.
right? But here's the fundamental difference and why it's important to keep these two things separate. In the case of a business, the thing that is your goal, which is more money, allows you to do your own job better. In the case of development, whatever impact you're hoping to have, let's say it's better, health outcomes, let's say it's longer life, it's better education, often is not the thing that allows you to do more of your work, right? And so focusing on that by itself requires that somebody else, in fact, support you, and that's where the donor funds come. Now, I realize that what you're saying is that there are lots of NGOs out there who are, who end up going with the winds of where their funding is coming from, and that's certainly a challenge. But it doesn't fundamentally mean that there can't be an organization that is based on donations, having positive.
Of course,
right?
I think I'm one of those.
Right,
But
exactly.
I think that my emphasis is that for-profits will get a much better understanding of who is their customer and what will their customer do to extract that money from them. Whereas the nonprofit can often, and I think this is the ICT for D versus D for M sort of question, we have a much greater potential if we're coming from a nonprofit point of view to not ask the client what he or she needs and to create a usability based around what can best support them, and instead to just create a top-down model that's not that much different than past Western development importing solutions.
You always say you want to push back on your donors because frankly they don't know what they're talking about. Resources such that whatever it is that's making the money is separate in terms of its goals and what, you know, how it does it from whatever it is that you're hoping to have impact. Now the one exception to this rule is when the impact is employment, right? Then, I mean, every company that does successfully is doing a great development for all of its employees, right? It's because they're making lots of money that they can pay their employees good benefits and et cetera, et cetera. That's fantastic.
For me, I'm big on more on the sustainability models, both for the for-profit and the non-profit. But I do realize we are out of time, so I'm going to end this here.